Danganronpa.
Thrills, chills, kills!
With 3 games now under its belt, Danganronpa has become a beloved series for many, and through my journey of playing all 3 of these wonderful games, I got to wondering, which one is the best Danganronpa game? Naturally, the only way to determine this is with scientific evidence. As such, I have determined a point system for each aspect that makes Danganronpa, Danganronpa. Characters. Which game introduced our favorites? And which gave us some we'd rather forget. Trials. The meat of the series. I'm looking for the best, well-structured, interesting, and overall fun ones in the series. Overall appearance and music. Ambiance can't be snuffed. And of course, the plot twists and overall story, which for me is one of the best things about the series. So of course I'm going to be taking into consideration the other fans and players of the game for each respective category and each respective game. However, I will be adding my own opinions to the mix. Whoever stacks up the most categories at the end shall be our victor. Rule number 1 of Danganronpa is do not get attached to the characters. Rule number 2, forget all about rule number 1 and cry for about a week when one of your favorite characters gets dotted. Is this soul-crushing? Very. But it does go to show how well created each character is to have such an effect on us as players. So, which few of these characters stood out as being the best? My plan here is to take the top 10 characters, then assign a point for their respective game. I'll be going off of what players chose while also adding in my own opinions. For time's sake, we're gonna skip the deep reasoning as to why these characters are ranked where they're ranked, but if you'd be interested in something like that, then there may or may not be a video currently in the works. I started out with my own personal top 10 list. Afterwards, I scavenged the web for other players' opinions and created 4 other top 10 lists based on what they said. With these top 10s, I tried to find which characters were all commonly adored by the fans. There were some ties in the frequency of each character listed, so to just make it fair, I made a top 14 list.
Luminary of the stars!
Damn right.
Whatever.
It's a lie! Don't lose hope now!
Interesting.
You're stupid hoe.
Leave it to me.
That's a great line.
I agree with that.
Oh, right! Hey.
Correct. Alas, we ended with a tie between V3 and Goodbye Despair. To break this tie, I figured, in addition to looking at our favorites, we should also look at those characters who made us think, if someone had to die, I'm glad it was them. Now, this one was super tight, let me tell you. Through the same process, I made a bunch of top 5 lists of the worst characters, obviously excluding characters from the first game, as we're trying to break the tie between V3 and Goodbye Despair. The results are as followed.
Jeez. Are you serious?
By a single vote, it seems that V3 has the most disliked characters out of the 2 games, which means congratulations to Goodbye Despair, our winner for the character round of this heated competition.
No, that's wrong. Voice crack. Oof.
You cannot have a solid Danganronpa game without some mind-tangling trials. Now, when I was looking at the results for this one, I gotta say I was quite surprised. A lot of the trials I personally loved rarely appeared in anyone else's top 10 lists. And a lot of the trials I just wasn't too fond of made it to the final list. So I guess my opinions are of the minority, but I'll leave my personal top 5 for a whole other video. So following the same process, it came down to the top 5 trials. Trigger Happy Havoc. Trial 2. This trial is a perfect example of misdirection. And let me tell you, this trial stressed me out. I was convinced that Togumi was the Blackened, and as such was gonna be punished. But nope, this one kept you on your toes the whole time. Everything from the tampering of the crime scene to Chihiro's gender reveal to the killer being Mondo left me and so many other people agape. With it being only the second trial in the entire series, it really packs a punch and sets the player up for the wild ride that is Danganronpa. Goodbye Despair. Trial 2. Now, in my opinion, the trial itself isn't really what ranks this one in the top 5. More so, its conclusion and aftermath. To anyone that suspected Peko as the killer, color me impressed. This trial similarly well utilizes misdirection in order to leave the player truly shocked. However, it's the reveal of Peko's motive that really sticks with you once the trial is over. Her dedication and relationship with Fuyuhiko tugged at a lot of people's heartstrings, even more so when you had to see them be separated forever. It was a surprisingly emotionally powered moment, focused on two characters that up until this point seemed almost devoid of emotion. The aftermath of the trial and Fuyuhiko's growth as a character also makes this trial one to remember. Trigger Happy Havoc. Trial 4. The great thing about Trigger Happy Havoc is that it paved the way for all the trials to follow. And Trial 4 introduced a concept that I'm sure a lot of people didn't even consider. That the Blackened could also be the victim. This is an emotionally charged trial. While it did give me a giggle or two through the back and forth of the whodunit of Toko and Hiro, I would be lying if I said I didn't shed a tear or two by the end. Just the tortured nature of Sakura mixed with Asahina's grief could make anyone sob. Goodbye Despair. Trial 4. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Initially, when seeing this listed so commonly as a fan favorite, I was pretty surprised. This trial was one of my lower ranked for a few reasons that I won't get into at this very moment. But after reviewing it a bit and seeing what other players had to say, I can understand why people may like this one a lot. The funhouse, while confusing, was ultimately a pretty cool motive and weapon. What stands out about this trial is the desperation that precedes it. Many other motives presented in games are certainly tempting, but they don't really match the feeling of despair quite like this one. The characters spend days trapped in this discombobulating funhouse without food or water. They all slowly become weaker and start to lose hope with each passing day. It's revealed that both the victim Nekomaru and the Blackened Gundam did what they did in order to put an end to their friend's suffering. It's an act of selflessness that really hits you hard. And then, of course, there's negative sass throughout the duration of the trial, which is just...
For a substitute reserve course student, you're quite knowledgeable.
so good. Goodbye Despair. Trial 5. This trial is hands down one of my favorites. Mostly because it's an accumulation of just how forked Nagito is. The setup is so meticulously planned out, and it makes you think, holy bejeez, this kid is absolutely insane, what is wrong with him? Like, I'm impressed. There's nothing really technical about this trial that makes it one of the best. I think it's just the fact that it's so out there and overall pretty unexpected. And its conclusion left me wanting to both clap and collapse on the floor and sit in a dark corner for a couple hours as I came to the conclusion that both my favorite characters were no longer with me. It is kind of crazy to me that V3 didn't crack the top 5 with at least one entry. But I guess it just goes to show how solid the first two games' trials were and how hard it is to top them. Our winner for this round goes to Goodbye Despair once more. It's the third game. Out the gate, I'm just gonna say it. There's no comparison when you compare its user interface to the other two. And also, getting to see the protagonist's sprites was a really cool addition. Now, initially this category was just going to be focused on the visual design, but I thought we might as well consider the environment design and the design in the minigames. In doing so, I still say V3 is our winner in this regard. I find the environment is a good mesh of both the first two games. It gives the player the feeling of being trapped and secluded, much like the first, but it gives them much more opportunity for exploration like the second. In terms of minigames, I think V3 improved on all the ones that came before it. They adjusted things like Hangman's Gambit so it wasn't so infuriating. The final comic creation made a lot more sense. And they had Saggy Taxi, which speaks for itself. So, point to you, V3. Good job. They make you cry. They make you think. They pump you up. Yes, it's the many bops of the Danganronpa soundtrack. Now for this category, I found it really hard to find other people's opinions on which score they prefer the best, so I'm mainly gonna focus on which songs and overall game score I thought was the best. Every soundtrack has a couple of standout songs that really emphasize the mood of the current in-game situation. Whether you're investigating a crime scene, or putting an end to the case, watching a heartbreaking execution, or, receiving your best friend's underwear, there's a song that perfectly complements it. But which game did it the best? My winner for this category has got to be the score that started it all, Trigger Happy Havoc. It has such a diverse set of songs, and some of my favorite in the series. You cannot tell me you do not aggressively dance to New World Order. And while I think V3 introduces some great songs too, like Beautiful Lie or the new introduction Danganronpa song, there's just something about Havoc's score that cannot be topped. Point, Trigger Happy Havoc. I can't do it. I cannot, for the life of me, pick which game has the best story. It's a mathematical and scientific impossible task. What I love about each game is how they each brought something different to the Danganronpa series. It's hard to say which is the best because they're all great, but for different reasons, and then they can't really be compared. Trigger Happy Havoc has the first story, the first twist, and it paves the way for all the additional stories to follow. While looking back, its plot twists may not seem as mind-blowing as the other two games, but it's still an extremely well-structured sequence of events. I remember smiling when I discovered Junko was the mastermind because I was so taken aback. But at the same time, I realized it made sense. This story was my introduction to the crazy world that is Danganronpa, and was unlike any other story I'd got to experience before. From the start, Goodbye Despair fucks with you. The introduction is oddly similar. The characters are oddly similar. The situation is oddly similar, yet somehow different? What I love about the story of this one is how it plays off our expectations from the first game. Just when we think we know the Danganronpa formula, the game says nope and throws us a curveball. The twist at the end is probably my favorite in the series. I love the idea of the cast being the true villains all along. It's been done before in other stories, but this approach for some reason just works better. It's a twist you can never predict, and yet when it's revealed, it makes sense and brings the whole game together. Hajime's story is another aspect that adds to the amazingly twisted story. He goes from being an unknown ultimate, leaving us speculating, to a non-ultimate, leaving us plain confused, to becoming the ultimate, leaving us utterly flabbergasted. V3 had a very hard task. It had to follow two amazing games with two amazing twists. How do you top that? By now the fans know what to expect, yet somehow you must still subvert those expectations. Well, here's how you do it. Kill off your protagonist after the first trial, make the mastermind someone so obvious it's not obvious, and bring your medal levels over 1,000 by having the game tell you that the world in-game is fiction. Yeah, I can say that V3 is a wild ride. Somehow, despite being the third entry in the series, it leaves the player utterly dumbfounded until the final reveal at the end. Now, I've heard some players not really liking V3 for that reason. They didn't like the meta aspect and felt we as fans were being attacked. But honestly, I don't almost see it that way. I think it's just an incredibly creative way to keep the twists alive and well. If this is in fact the last game of the series, what better way to cap it off than with what I'm sure will be remembered as the most mind-boggling, confusing, heartbreaking twist of the series. Point, Trigger Happy Havoc. Point, Goodbye Despair. Point, V3. And without further ado, our winner tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. With a great cast, insane trials, and a fantastic story to boot, it's no wonder why everyone loves this game so much. That being said, this came down to only a couple points. All games in the Danganronpa series are truly magnificent. I'm really grateful that I got a chance to experience each and every one of them. But I want to know what you think. What's your favorite game in the series? And if it's All Star Despair Girls, I'm so sorry.